Question 1. During the evaluation of a new significant investment opportunity for Phat Group, a junior analyst proposes to proceed with the initial financial projections based on optimistic market trends without a comprehensive risk assessment, citing the urgency to present a favorable case to senior management. What is the most appropriate course of action for the senior analyst to ensure compliance with Phat Group's regulatory obligations and ethical standards? Option A. Immediately halt the projection process and request a detailed risk assessment and validation of market assumptions from independent sources before proceeding. Option B. Instruct the junior analyst to finalize the projections quickly to meet the internal deadline, with the understanding that risks will be addressed in a subsequent review. Option C. Advise the junior analyst to proceed with the optimistic projections, but to include a disclaimer noting the assumptions made. Option D. Forward the optimistic projections to senior management as presented, with a personal note expressing reservations about the underlying assumptions. Correct answer is A. Immediately halt the projection process and request a detailed risk assessment and validation of market assumptions from independent sources before proceeding. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the company's strategic objectives with strict adherence to regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. Misinterpreting or disregarding regulatory requirements can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of investor confidence for Phat Group. The pressure to achieve financial targets must not override the fundamental duty to operate within the law and maintain transparency. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and application of the relevant regulatory framework governing financial reporting and disclosure for publicly listed companies in Vietnam. This means ensuring all disclosures are accurate, complete, and timely, and that any potential conflicts of interest are identified and managed according to established corporate governance principles. Specifically, it requires a proactive stance in seeking clarification from legal and compliance departments when uncertainties arise, and prioritizing the integrity of financial information over expediency. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and the legal obligations of Phat Group to its shareholders and the market. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over accuracy would fail to meet the regulatory standards for financial reporting. This could involve making assumptions or estimations without proper substantiation, leading to misstatements that violate accounting principles and disclosure requirements. Another incorrect approach, which involves overlooking potential conflicts of interest, would breach ethical guidelines and potentially Vietnamese corporate law, creating an environment where decisions might be influenced by personal gain rather than the best interests of Phat Group and its stakeholders. A third incorrect approach, which is to delay disclosure of material information until it is absolutely unavoidable, would contravene regulations mandating timely disclosure of significant events that could impact the company's share price. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core regulatory and ethical obligations applicable to the situation. This should be followed by a comprehensive assessment of the facts, seeking expert advice, legal, compliance, audit, when necessary, and evaluating potential courses of action against these obligations. The chosen path must always prioritize compliance, transparency, and the long-term integrity of Phat Group. Question 2. Risk assessment procedures indicate that new regulatory requirements necessitate the implementation of enhanced data security controls within Phat Group, considering the company's operational scale and existing IT infrastructure. Which approach to implementing these new controls is most prudent and compliant? Option A. Postpone the implementation of the most complex security controls until a future date when IT resources are less constrained, focusing only on the simplest requirements for now. Option B. Implement the new security controls in isolation from existing IT infrastructure to avoid potential conflicts, even if it creates redundant systems. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify the most critical control gaps, then implement prioritized controls in a phased manner, ensuring integration with existing systems and continuous monitoring. Option D. Immediately deploy all newly mandated security controls across all systems to ensure full compliance from the outset, regardless of potential operational disruption. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify the most critical control gaps, Then implement prioritized controls in a phased manner, ensuring integration with existing systems and continuous monitoring. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for robust risk management with the practicalities of implementing new controls within a large, established organization like Phat Group. The pressure to quickly integrate new regulatory requirements without disrupting ongoing operations necessitates careful consideration of resource allocation, potential impact on existing processes, and the effectiveness of proposed solutions. A hasty or ill-conceived approach could lead to compliance gaps, operational inefficiencies, or even unintended new risks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased implementation of new controls, prioritizing those with the highest potential impact on mitigating identified risks and ensuring alignment with Phat Group's existing risk appetite and operational capabilities. This method is justified by principles of effective risk management, which advocate for a systematic, proportionate, and integrated approach. It allows for continuous monitoring and adjustment, ensuring that resources are used efficiently and that controls are practical and sustainable within the company's context. This aligns with the general principles of good corporate governance and regulatory compliance, which emphasize a proactive and adaptable risk management framework. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that focuses solely on immediate, broad implementation of all new controls without prior assessment of their impact or feasibility risks, regulatory noncompliance, if the controls are ineffective or impractical. It also fails to adhere to sound risk management principles by not prioritizing based on risk severity or potential for mitigation. An approach that delays implementation of critical controls due to perceived operational disruption, even when the risks are significant, creates a direct compliance failure, demonstrates a disregard for regulatory obligations, and exposes Phat Group to potential penalties and reputational damage. This approach prioritizes short-term convenience over long-term regulatory adherence and risk mitigation. An approach that implements controls without considering their integration with existing systems and processes can lead to operational inefficiencies, increased costs, and the creation of new, unforeseen risks. This lack of holistic thinking is a failure in both risk management and operational planning, potentially undermining the very objectives of the new controls. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured risk assessment methodology that includes identification, analysis, evaluation, treatment, and monitoring of risks. When faced with new regulatory requirements, the process should involve 1. Understanding the specific requirements and their implications for Phat Group. 2. Conducting a thorough risk assessment to identify potential gaps and vulnerabilities. 3. Prioritizing control implementation based on risk severity, likelihood, and potential impact. 4. Developing a phased implementation plan that considers operational feasibility, resource availability, and integration with existing systems. 5. Establishing clear metrics for monitoring the effectiveness of implemented controls and making adjustments as necessary. This systematic approach ensures compliance, optimizes resource allocation, and fosters a resilient risk management culture. Question 3. Performance analysis shows a significant decline in production efficiency within a key manufacturing division of Phat Group over the past quarter. Management is concerned about meeting annual targets and is considering immediate, drastic measures to rectify the situation. Which of the following actions best reflects a professional and compliant response to this performance analysis? Option A. Publicly announce a performance-based bonus reduction for the entire division, citing the efficiency drop as the sole reason, and begin disciplinary proceedings against the division head. Option B. Immediately implement a mandatory overtime policy for all staff in the affected division and impose a temporary freeze on all non-essential expenditures to force a quick turnaround in production numbers. Option C. Initiate a comprehensive review of operational processes, supply chain logistics, and employee training programs to identify the root causes of the efficiency decline, while simultaneously engaging with divisional leadership to understand their perspective and potential contributing factors. Option D. Focus solely on increasing raw material input, assuming that higher volume will naturally compensate for the observed efficiency drop, and defer any further analysis until the end of the fiscal year. Correct answer is C. Initiate a comprehensive review of operational processes, supply chain logistics, and employee training programs to identify the root causes of the efficiency decline, while simultaneously engaging with divisional leadership to understand their perspective and potential contributing factors. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between achieving performance targets and adhering to ethical and regulatory standards. The pressure to meet ambitious goals can tempt individuals to overlook or rationalize actions that might be non-compliant or unethical. Careful judgment is required to balance business objectives with the imperative to act with integrity and within the bounds of the law. The correct approach involves a thorough, objective investigation into the performance discrepancies, focusing on identifying root causes without prejudging the outcome. This aligns with the principles of fairness, due diligence, and accountability expected of employees within Phat Group and under Vietnamese labor law and corporate governance guidelines. It ensures that any corrective actions are based on factual evidence and are applied equitably, fostering a culture of transparency and trust. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without understanding the underlying performance issues is professionally unacceptable. This fails to address the root cause, potentially leading to recurring problems and missed opportunities for genuine improvement. It also risks creating an environment where employees feel undervalued or unfairly treated, potentially leading to decreased morale and increased turnover, which is detrimental to Phat Group's long-term success and could violate labor regulations regarding fair treatment. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing punitive measures without a proper investigation is also professionally unsound. This demonstrates a lack of due process and can lead to unjust consequences for employees, damaging their careers and the company's reputation. Such actions could contravene principles of natural justice and Vietnamese labor law, which mandate fair disciplinary procedures. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the performance issue and the relevant objectives. Second, gather all relevant data and information objectively. Third, consult internal policies and relevant regulations. Fourth, conduct a fair and thorough investigation, allowing for employee input. Fifth, based on the findings, determine appropriate and proportionate actions, ensuring they are aligned with ethical principles and legal requirements. Finally, document all steps and decisions meticulously. Question 4. Quality control measures reveal that Phat Group is experiencing a significant downturn in a key market segment, which is expected to negatively impact its upcoming quarterly earnings. The finance department is considering several approaches to manage the communication of this information to investors. Which of the following approaches best upholds the company's ethical and regulatory obligations? Option A. Postpone the release of the quarterly earnings report until the market situation improves or until more favorable financial projections can be formulated. Option B. Issue a press release highlighting optimistic future growth prospects without explicitly detailing the current market challenges or their immediate financial implications. Option C. Proactively disclose the market challenges and their anticipated impact on earnings, along with a clear outline of the strategies Phat Group is implementing to mitigate these effects. Option D. Focus communication on the company's strengths and positive performance in other segments, while downplaying the severity of the downturn in the affected market. The correct answer is C. Proactively disclose the market challenges and their anticipated impact on earnings, along with a clear outline of the strategies Phat Group is implementing to mitigate these effects. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial needs with its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations. Phat Group, as a publicly listed entity, is subject to stringent disclosure requirements and market integrity principles. The pressure to meet financial targets can create a conflict of interest, where the temptation to present a misleadingly positive financial picture might arise. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all reporting adheres to the highest standards of accuracy and transparency, even when faced with adverse market conditions. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent communication strategy with stakeholders, including investors and regulatory bodies. This approach prioritizes accurate financial reporting and timely disclosure of material information, even if it is unfavorable. By openly communicating the challenges and the steps being taken to address them, Phat Group demonstrates its commitment to good corporate governance and builds trust with its investors. This aligns with the principles of fair disclosure and market integrity, which are fundamental to maintaining investor confidence and complying with regulatory frameworks governing listed companies. An incorrect approach that involves selectively disclosing positive information while withholding negative developments is ethically unsound and likely violates regulatory requirements. This practice can be construed as market manipulation or insider trading, as it creates an artificial perception of the company's performance. Such selective disclosure erodes investor trust and can lead to significant legal and reputational damage for Phat Group. Another incorrect approach, which is to delay the release of financial results until a more favorable picture can be presented, is also a serious breach of regulatory obligations. Timeliness of disclosure is crucial for investors to make informed decisions. The undue delay suggests an attempt to conceal unfavorable information and can lead to penalties from regulatory authorities. A third incorrect approach, which is to present projections that are overly optimistic and not grounded in realistic assumptions, misleads investors about the future prospects of Phat Group. While forward-looking statements are common, they must be based on reasonable assumptions and clearly articulated risks. Unsubstantiated optimism can lead to significant investor disappointment and potential legal action. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough assessment of the financial situation, consultation with legal and compliance teams, and a commitment to transparent and timely communication. Professionals must prioritize adherence to regulatory requirements and ethical principles over short-term financial pressures. This involves understanding the specific disclosure obligations applicable to Phat Group and ensuring that all communications are accurate, complete, and not misleading. Question 5. Process analysis reveals that a foreign entity has approached Phat Group with a proposal for a strategic partnership that promises significant market expansion. However, the foreign entity's operational history, as briefly reviewed by the initial contact person, suggests a potential for indirect engagement with entities that may not fully comply with international ethical standards, although no direct violations are immediately apparent. The proposed partnership could offer substantial revenue growth for Phat Group. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Phat Group employee who received this proposal? Option A. Immediately escalate the proposal to Phat Group's legal and compliance departments for a comprehensive due diligence review, ensuring all internal policies and relevant Vietnamese regulations are considered before any commitment is made. Option B. Inform the foreign entity that Phat Group is not interested in partnerships that involve any entities with even potential ethical concerns, without further internal consultation. Option C. Decline the partnership outright due to the vague concerns about the foreign entity's operational history to avoid any potential association with non-compliant practices. Option D. Proceed with the partnership based on the potential revenue growth and the foreign entity's assurances, as the perceived risks are not explicitly confirmed violations. Correct answer is A. Immediately escalate the proposal to Phat Group's legal and compliance departments for a comprehensive due diligence review, ensuring all internal policies and relevant Vietnamese regulations are considered before any commitment is made. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Phat Group employee due to the inherent conflict between potential business opportunities and the strict adherence to regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. The core difficulty lies in navigating the gray area, where a seemingly minor deviation from standard procedure could lead to significant legal and reputational repercussions for Phat Group. Careful judgment is required to prioritize integrity and compliance over short-term gains or perceived efficiencies. The correct approach involves a thorough and documented internal review process that prioritizes compliance with Phat Group's internal policies and relevant Vietnamese regulations. This approach is professionally sound because it ensures that any decision regarding the proposed partnership is made with full awareness of legal obligations, potential risks, and ethical considerations. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and risk management expected of a publicly listed entity like Phat Group. By engaging relevant departments such as legal and compliance, the company demonstrates a commitment to due diligence and responsible business practices, thereby safeguarding its reputation and avoiding potential penalties. This proactive stance is crucial in maintaining stakeholder trust and ensuring long-term sustainability. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the partnership without a formal review process, based solely on the perceived benefits and the assurance of the potential partner, is professionally unacceptable. This failure to conduct due diligence exposes Phat Group to significant regulatory risks, potentially violating Vietnamese laws related to foreign investment, anti-corruption, or data privacy, depending on the nature of the partnership. It also represents an ethical lapse, as it bypasses established internal controls designed to prevent misconduct and protect the company's interests. Another incorrect approach, which is to immediately reject the partnership proposal without any investigation, is also professionally suboptimal. While it avoids immediate risk, it demonstrates a lack of strategic foresight and an unwillingness to explore potentially beneficial opportunities. This can stifle innovation and growth within Phat Group and may be perceived as overly risk-averse, potentially hindering the company's competitive edge. It fails to leverage the expertise of internal departments to assess and mitigate risks effectively. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This framework should mandate the involvement of relevant stakeholders, including legal, compliance, and business development teams, to evaluate opportunities against established policies and regulatory requirements. It should encourage a balanced approach that explores potential benefits while rigorously identifying and mitigating associated risks, ensuring that all decisions are transparent, documented, and aligned with the company's values and legal obligations. Question 6. The evaluation methodology shows that a candidate for a role at Phat Group is asked to describe their approach to risk assessment. Which of the following approaches best demonstrates an understanding of effective risk management principles relevant to a large, publicly traded corporation? Option A. Focusing on identifying and analyzing potential future risks that could impact Phat Group's strategic objectives and operational continuity, and integrating these findings into business planning. Option B. Emphasizing the completion of mandatory compliance checklists to ensure adherence to all current regulations. Option C. Delegating risk assessment tasks to individual departments to manage as part of their routine operational duties. Option D. Primarily reviewing past incidents and near misses to understand what has gone wrong before and documenting lessons learned. The correct answer is A. Focusing on identifying and analyzing potential future risks that could impact Phat Group's strategic objectives and operational continuity, and integrating these findings into business planning. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a candidate applying to Phat Group by requiring them to demonstrate an understanding of risk assessment within the context of a hiring assessment. The challenge lies in identifying the most appropriate risk assessment approach that aligns with regulatory expectations for a publicly listed company like Phat Group, which operates within Vietnam's legal and regulatory framework. A nuanced understanding is needed to differentiate between proactive and reactive risk management and to recognize the importance of integrating risk assessment into strategic decision-making rather than treating it as a mere compliance exercise. The correct approach involves a forward-looking, integrated risk assessment methodology. This is right because it aligns with best practices for corporate governance and risk management expected of companies listed on stock exchanges, such as those in Vietnam. Regulatory frameworks typically encourage or mandate that companies identify, assess, and manage risks that could impact their strategic objectives, financial stability, and reputation. An integrated approach ensures that risk considerations are embedded in business processes and decision-making, fostering a culture of risk awareness and proactive mitigation. This aligns with the principles of prudent management and shareholder protection, which are paramount for a company like Phat Group. An approach that focuses solely on historical data and past incidents is incorrect because it is inherently reactive. While historical data is valuable for understanding past performance, it does not adequately prepare an organization for future, unforeseen risks or emerging threats. This failure to be proactive can lead to significant financial losses, reputational damage, and noncompliance with evolving regulations. An approach that prioritizes compliance checklists over strategic risk identification is also incorrect. While compliance is essential, it represents a minimum standard. A robust risk assessment must go beyond simply ticking boxes to identify potential risks that, while not explicitly violating current regulations, could still materially affect Phat Group's operations, profitability, or strategic goals. Over-reliance on checklists can create a false sense of security and miss critical vulnerabilities. An approach that treats risk assessment as a purely operational, day-to-day task without senior management involvement is incorrect. Effective risk management requires oversight and strategic direction from the highest levels of the organization. Without this, risk assessments may lack the necessary scope, resources, and authority to be truly effective, and the findings may not be integrated into the company's overall strategy, leaving Phat Group exposed to significant threats. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the strategic objectives of the organization. This is followed by identifying potential internal and external risks that could hinder the achievement of these objectives. The assessment should then prioritize these risks based on their likelihood and potential impact. And finally, develop and implement appropriate mitigation strategies. This process should be iterative and integrated into the company's governance structure, with regular review and reporting to senior management and the board. Question 7. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a Phat Group employee has inadvertently come into possession of what appears to be proprietary strategic planning documents from a competitor during a routine site visit. The employee is unsure whether to proceed with analyzing this information for competitive advantage or to report it. Which of the following represents the most appropriate and ethically sound course of action for the employee? Option A. Immediately cease any analysis of the documents, secure them, and report their discovery to the Phat Group's compliance department for further assessment and guidance. Option B. Share the documents with other relevant departments within Phat Group to gather diverse perspectives on their implications. Option C. Proceed with analyzing the documents to understand the competitor's strategy and identify potential market opportunities for Phat Group. Option D. Discard the documents and continue with standard market research, assuming the information is irrelevant or obtained unethically. The correct answer is A. Immediately cease any analysis of the documents, secure them, and report their discovery to the Phat Group's compliance department for further assessment and guidance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Phat Group employees regarding the ethical handling of potentially sensitive information obtained during business operations. The challenge lies in balancing the company's legitimate need for competitive intelligence with the ethical obligation to avoid unfair advantages derived from non-public information. Mismanagement of this situation could lead to reputational damage, regulatory scrutiny, and erosion of trust among stakeholders. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate market research and the misuse of confidential information. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough internal review process to ascertain the nature and origin of the information. This includes verifying if the information is indeed proprietary or non-public, and if its acquisition was ethical and legal. If the information is deemed sensitive or proprietary, the appropriate action is to refrain from using it for competitive advantage and to report its discovery through established internal channels, such as the compliance department or legal counsel. This aligns with principles of fair competition and ethical business conduct, and implicitly with regulatory frameworks that prohibit insider trading or the misuse of confidential information for market manipulation, even if not explicitly detailed in a specific Phat Group hiring assessment test regulation, as these are universal ethical standards expected in any professional setting. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding with the analysis and utilization of the information without verification or internal consultation represents a significant ethical failure. It assumes the information is fair game for competitive use, disregarding the possibility of it being confidential or obtained improperly. This could lead to accusations of unfair business practices and potential breaches of confidentiality agreements or data privacy regulations, depending on the specific nature of the information. Sharing the information with other departments or external parties without proper authorization or assessment is also an ethical lapse. This constitutes a breach of confidentiality and could inadvertently disseminate sensitive data, leading to market disruption or harm to the originating entity. It bypasses necessary internal controls designed to protect proprietary information. Ignoring the information and continuing with standard market research is a missed opportunity to understand potential risks or opportunities. But more importantly, It fails to address the ethical implications of possessing potentially sensitive data. While less immediately damaging than the other incorrect approaches, it demonstrates a lack of diligence in upholding ethical standards and could lead to future complications if the information's existence or nature becomes known without proper internal handling. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Phat Group should adopt a proactive and principled approach. When encountering potentially sensitive information, the decision-making process should involve 1. Immediate pause and assessment. Do not act on the information until its nature and origin are understood. 2. Internal consultation. Engage with the compliance or legal department to determine the appropriate course of action based on company policy and ethical guidelines. 3. Adherence to policy. Strictly follow established internal procedures for handling sensitive or proprietary information. 4. Prioritization of ethics and compliance. Ensure all actions are aligned with legal requirements and the highest ethical standards of business conduct. Question 8. The efficiency study reveals that implementing significant automation in Phat Group's manufacturing facilities could lead to substantial cost reductions. However, this automation is projected to result in a considerable number of job redundancies and potentially increase waste byproducts if not managed with advanced environmental controls. Considering the regulatory framework and ethical considerations for Phat Group, which approach to implementing these efficiency measures is most professionally sound? Option A. Conduct a thorough impact assessment on employees and the environment, develop mitigation strategies for job losses and waste management, and engage with relevant stakeholders before finalizing and implementing the automation plan. Option B. Proceed with the automation project immediately to capture cost savings, with a plan to address employee concerns and environmental issues reactively as they arise. Option C. Prioritize shareholder returns by implementing the automation with minimal upfront investment in employee retraining or environmental controls, focusing only on the direct cost savings. Option D. Delay the automation project indefinitely due to the potential negative impacts, opting for less efficient but more labor-intensive processes to avoid any stakeholder disruption. Correct answer is B. Proceed with the automation project immediately to capture cost savings, with a plan to address employee concerns and environmental issues reactively as they arise. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between maximizing shareholder value and upholding ethical responsibilities towards other stakeholders, particularly employees and the broader community, when implementing efficiency measures. Phat Group, as a large industrial entity, operates within a regulatory environment that mandates adherence to labor laws, environmental standards, and corporate governance principles. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing interests and ensure that cost-saving initiatives do not lead to regulatory breaches or ethical compromises. The correct approach involves a comprehensive stakeholder impact assessment prior to implementing any efficiency measures. This means not only identifying potential cost savings, but also meticulously evaluating the consequences for employees, e.g., job security, working conditions, the environment, e.g., pollution, resource depletion, and the local community, e.g., economic impact, social responsibility. This approach aligns with the principles of sustainable business practices and corporate social responsibility, which are increasingly embedded in regulatory expectations and ethical frameworks for large corporations like Phat Group. Specifically, it adheres to Vietnamese labor laws that protect employee rights and require fair treatment, as well as environmental regulations designed to mitigate industrial impact. It also reflects good corporate governance by considering the long-term viability and reputation of the company, which are influenced by its relationships with all stakeholders. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate cost reduction without considering employee welfare would likely violate Vietnamese labor laws concerning redundancy procedures, severance pay, and the duty of care owed to employees. This could lead to legal penalties, reputational damage, and employee unrest. Another incorrect approach that neglects environmental compliance in the pursuit of efficiency would contravene Vietnam's environmental protection laws, resulting in fines, operational shutdowns, and significant harm to the environment and public health. A third incorrect approach that focuses solely on financial gains for shareholders, disregarding the broader societal impact, would fail to meet the expectations of responsible corporate citizenship and could alienate customers, investors, and the government, ultimately undermining the company's long-term sustainability. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape and ethical principles applicable to Hoa Phat Group's operations in Vietnam. This involves proactive identification of potential risks and impacts on all stakeholder groups. The process should include open communication channels with employees and relevant community representatives, seeking their input and addressing concerns. When evaluating efficiency initiatives, a multi-criteria analysis should be used, weighing financial benefits against social, environmental, and legal considerations. The ultimate decision should aim for a sustainable outcome that benefits the company in the long run while fulfilling its ethical and legal obligations. Question 9. Investigation of a Hoa Phat Group procurement officer who discovers that a key supplier being considered for a significant contract is owned by their sibling. The officer has a close personal relationship with their sibling and is aware of the supplier's capabilities. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Hoa Phat Group procurement officer to ensure compliance with ethical standards and regulatory expectations? Option A. Terminate the personal relationship with the sibling to eliminate the conflict of interest for participating in the procurement evaluation. Option B. Proceed with evaluating the supplier based on merit, believing their professional judgment can remain impartial despite the familial connection. Option C. Discreetly favor the sibling's company during the evaluation process, rationalizing that it is a minor advantage given the supplier's strong qualifications. Option D. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to the relevant Hoa Phat Group compliance department and recuse themselves from all discussions and decisions concerning the supplier. The correct answer is D. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to the relevant Hoa Phat Group compliance department and recuse themselves from all discussions and decisions concerning the supplier. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an employee of Hoa Phat Group to navigate a potential conflict of interest while upholding the company's ethical standards and regulatory obligations. The core difficulty lies in balancing personal relationships with professional duties and ensuring that any engagement with a supplier does not compromise Hoa Phat Group's procurement integrity or violate its internal policies, which are designed to align with Vietnamese commercial law and ethical business practices. Careful judgment is required to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. The correct approach involves transparently disclosing the personal relationship to the relevant authority within Hoa Phat Group, such as the compliance department or a designated manager, and recusing oneself from any decision-making processes related to the supplier in question. This approach is correct because it prioritizes transparency, accountability, and adherence to ethical principles. By disclosing the relationship, the employee allows Hoa Phat Group to implement appropriate safeguards, such as assigning oversight of the supplier to an independent party. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and the spirit of regulations that aim to prevent corruption and ensure fair dealing. It demonstrates a commitment to acting in the best interest of the company and maintaining its reputation. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the supplier relationship without disclosure, assuming personal integrity is sufficient. This is ethically flawed because it creates a significant risk of perceived or actual bias, undermining the fairness of the procurement process. It could also violate internal Hoa Phat Group policies and potentially Vietnamese laws concerning conflicts of interest and anti-corruption, leading to reputational damage and legal repercussions for both the employee and the company. Another incorrect approach would be to subtly influence the procurement process in favor of the supplier due to the personal relationship, even without direct financial gain. This is a breach of professional duty and ethical conduct. It compromises the integrity of Hoa Phat Group's operations and can lead to suboptimal business decisions based on personal connection rather than merit, potentially violating principles of fair competition and good faith dealings expected under Vietnamese commercial law. A third incorrect approach would be to terminate the personal relationship solely to avoid reporting it, while still participating in the procurement process. While seemingly addressing the conflict, this is disingenuous and does not fully mitigate the risk. The underlying personal connection may still influence judgment, and the act of terminating a relationship solely to circumvent disclosure can be seen as an attempt to hide a potential issue, rather than proactively manage it, which is contrary to a culture of openness and integrity. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a proactive assessment of potential conflicts of interest. Employees should be familiar with Phat Group's Code of Conduct and Conflict of Interest policies. When a potential conflict arises, the immediate step should be to consult these policies, and if in doubt, err on the side of caution by seeking guidance from the compliance department or a supervisor. Transparency and open communication are paramount in managing such situations effectively and ethically. Question 10. The audit findings indicate a potential discrepancy in the revenue recognition for a significant contract at Phat Group. Management has provided a verbal explanation that they believe resolves the issue, but the supporting documentation is incomplete. The audit deadline is approaching rapidly. Which of the following actions is the most appropriate course of action for the auditor? Option A. Request detailed supporting documentation from management to substantiate their explanation, quantify the potential impact of the discrepancy, and discuss the findings with appropriate levels of management before concluding on the revenue recognition. Option B. Ignore the discrepancy as it is likely immaterial given the tight deadline and the verbal assurance from management. Option C. Document the verbal explanation from management and proceed with the audit, assuming the issue is resolved. Option D. Immediately report the potential discrepancy to the relevant Vietnamese regulatory authorities, citing incomplete documentation. The correct answer is C. Document the verbal explanation from management and proceed with the audit, assuming the issue is resolved. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for timely and accurate financial reporting with the imperative to comply with Phat Group's internal policies and relevant Vietnamese accounting standards. The auditor's discovery of a potential misstatement, even if seemingly minor, necessitates a thorough investigation and appropriate action to ensure the integrity of the financial statements. The pressure to finalize the audit within a tight deadline can create a temptation to overlook or downplay such findings, but this would compromise professional skepticism and regulatory adherence. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of investigating the identified discrepancy, quantifying its impact, and discussing it with Phat Group's management. This aligns with the principles of professional skepticism and due professional care expected of auditors under Vietnamese auditing standards. Specifically, auditors are required to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence and to exercise professional judgment in evaluating that evidence. If a misstatement is identified, auditors must determine whether it, individually or when aggregated with other misstatements, is material. If management refuses to correct a material misstatement, the auditor must consider the implications for the audit opinion. This approach ensures transparency, accountability, and compliance with the reporting framework. An incorrect approach would be to accept management's verbal assurance without further investigation or documentation. This fails to uphold professional skepticism, as it relies on unverified assertions rather than objective evidence. It also risks overlooking a material misstatement, which would violate auditing standards and potentially mislead stakeholders. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately escalate the issue to regulatory bodies without first attempting to resolve it with Phat Group's management. While escalation is necessary if management is uncooperative or if the misstatement is clearly material and uncorrected, bypassing the initial discussion phase can damage the auditor-client relationship and may not be the most efficient resolution. Furthermore, prematurely involving regulators without proper due diligence could lead to unnecessary scrutiny and reputational damage for both the auditor and Phat Group. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes evidence-based judgment, adherence to professional standards, and clear communication. This involves 1. Identifying and documenting the discrepancy. 2. Performing procedures to understand the nature and cause of the discrepancy and to quantify its potential impact. 3. Discussing the findings with appropriate levels of management and those charged with governance, seeking their explanation and proposed corrective actions. 4. Evaluating the reasonableness of management's response and the impact of any uncorrected misstatements on the financial statements. 5. Determining the appropriate audit opinion based on the evaluation. Question 11. The assessment process reveals that a candidate for a key position at Phat Group has demonstrated exceptional communication skills and a strong cultural fit during informal interactions, but their performance on a critical technical skills module of the Phat Group hiring assessment test was significantly below the passing threshold. The hiring manager is considering recommending the candidate for the role, believing their soft skills will compensate for the technical gap, which approach best upholds the integrity of the hiring assessment. Option A. Reject the candidate based solely on their failure to meet the minimum standard in the critical technical skills module, as per the assessment guidelines. Option B. Recommend the candidate for the role, but only after seeking informal feedback from several senior employees at Phat Group about their general impression of the candidate's potential. Option C. Advocate for a re-evaluation of the technical skills module's passing threshold for this specific candidate, citing their strong performance in other assessment areas. Option D. Recommend the candidate for the role, emphasizing their strong soft skills and cultural fit as outweighing the technical deficiency, and propose a plan for on-the-job technical training. Correct answer is D. Recommend the candidate for the role, emphasizing their strong soft skills and cultural fit as outweighing the technical deficiency, and propose a plan for on-the-job technical training. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential conflict between a candidate's perceived suitability for a role at Phat Group and the strict adherence to the assessment's defined criteria. The hiring manager must exercise careful judgment to ensure fairness, objectivity, and compliance with the established assessment framework, preventing personal bias or external pressures from influencing the outcome. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the candidate's performance against each specific criterion outlined in the Phat Group hiring assessment test guidelines. This ensures that the evaluation is grounded in objective evidence and directly addresses the skills and competencies the assessment is designed to measure. This aligns with the ethical principle of fairness and the regulatory requirement to conduct assessments in a standardized and unbiased manner, as implicitly expected by any structured hiring process, designed to identify the most qualified candidates for Phat Group. An incorrect approach would be to overlook a significant deficiency in a core competency area simply because the candidate possesses other desirable traits. This fails to uphold the integrity of the assessment process, as it deviates from the predefined standards set by Phat Group for evaluating candidates. It also risks hiring an individual who may not be adequately prepared for the specific demands of the role, potentially leading to future performance issues and undermining the effectiveness of the hiring assessment. Another incorrect approach would be to allow anecdotal evidence or informal feedback from other employees to override the formal assessment results. This introduces subjectivity and hearsay into a process that should be based on documented performance against established criteria. Such a deviation from the structured assessment framework can lead to accusations of favoritism or unfairness, damaging Phat Group's reputation as an employer and potentially violating internal HR policies designed to ensure merit-based hiring. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a commitment to the established assessment framework. This means meticulously documenting how each candidate performs against each criterion, seeking clarification on any ambiguous results, and resisting the temptation to make exceptions based on non-assessment-related factors. If a candidate's performance is borderline, the focus should remain on the evidence presented within the assessment, not on subjective impressions or external influences. Question 12. When evaluating the potential impact of a new large-scale infrastructure project on Phat Group's overall business strategy and operational framework, which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with Vietnamese regulatory requirements and ethical business practices? Option A. Delegating the entire impact assessment process to an external consultant without establishing clear internal oversight or defining specific compliance benchmarks. Option B. Focusing exclusively on the projected increase in production capacity and market share, assuming that regulatory compliance will be addressed as a secondary concern. Option C. Prioritizing the immediate reduction of capital expenditure for the project while deferring detailed analysis of its long-term operational and environmental consequences. Option D. Conducting a comprehensive assessment that considers financial, operational, environmental, social, and legal implications, aligning with Vietnamese corporate governance principles and relevant industry standards. The correct answer is C. prioritizing the immediate reduction of capital expenditure for the project while deferring detailed analysis of its long-term operational and environmental consequences. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because Phat Group, as a publicly listed entity, operates under stringent Vietnamese regulations governing corporate governance and financial reporting. The impact assessment of a new strategic initiative requires a thorough understanding of how this initiative might affect the company's financial health, operational efficiency, and compliance obligations. A failure to conduct a comprehensive impact assessment could lead to unforeseen risks, misallocation of resources, and potential breaches of regulatory requirements, jeopardizing investor confidence and the company's reputation. The correct approach involves a systematic evaluation of potential positive and negative consequences across various business functions, considering both quantitative and qualitative factors. This aligns with the principles of sound corporate governance and risk management mandated by Vietnamese law, such as the Law on Enterprises and relevant decrees from the Ministry of Finance and the State Securities Commission. A robust impact assessment ensures that Phat Group makes informed decisions, proactively identifies mitigation strategies for potential downsides, and maximizes the benefits of the initiative, thereby upholding its fiduciary duties to shareholders and stakeholders. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost savings without considering long-term operational disruptions would be professionally unacceptable. This overlooks the potential for increased inefficiencies, decreased product quality, or supply chain vulnerabilities, which could lead to financial losses and regulatory scrutiny under Vietnamese accounting standards and disclosure requirements. Similarly, an approach that prioritizes market share gains at the expense of environmental compliance or labor standards would violate Vietnamese environmental protection laws and labor regulations, exposing Phat Group to significant fines, legal action, and reputational damage. Finally, an approach that neglects to assess the impact on existing contractual obligations with suppliers or customers could lead to breaches of contract, resulting in legal disputes and financial penalties, contrary to the principles of good faith and fair dealing expected under Vietnamese civil law. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the scope and objectives of the impact assessment. This involves identifying key stakeholders, relevant regulatory frameworks, specifically Vietnamese laws and regulations, and potential areas of impact. The next step is to gather data and information, employing both quantitative and qualitative methods. This data should then be analyzed to identify risks and opportunities, followed by the development of mitigation and enhancement strategies. Finally, the findings should be documented and communicated to relevant decision-makers, ensuring that the assessment informs strategic choices and operational planning in a compliant and ethical manner. Question 13. The control framework reveals a potential weakness in the procurement process at Phat Group, specifically concerning the segregation of duties for approving purchase orders and receiving goods. Which of the following approaches best addresses this control weakness in compliance with corporate governance principles and relevant Vietnamese regulations? Option A. Implement a formal process to document the identified weakness. Assess its potential impact on Phat Group's financial reporting and operational objectives, and design and implement compensating controls or procedural changes to ensure proper segregation of duties. Option B. Immediately halt all procurement activities until a complete overhaul of the procurement department's structure can be completed, prioritizing cost savings over immediate operational continuity. Option C. Assign the responsibility for both approving purchase orders and receiving goods to a single, highly trusted senior manager to streamline the process and reduce administrative overhead. Option D. Address the weakness through informal verbal instructions to staff involved, assuming their integrity will prevent any misuse of the current process. The correct answer is A. Implement a formal process to document the identified weakness, assess its potential impact on Phat Group's financial reporting and operational objectives, and design and implement compensating controls or procedural changes to ensure proper segregation of duties. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge for a candidate applying to Phat Group by requiring them to understand and apply internal control principles within a specific regulatory context, likely related to corporate governance and financial reporting standards applicable in Vietnam, where Phat Group operates. The challenge lies in discerning the most effective and compliant method for addressing a potential control weakness, demanding not just theoretical knowledge, but practical application, aligned with the company's operational environment and relevant legal frameworks. Careful judgment is required to balance efficiency with robust control mechanisms. Correct approach involves a proactive and documented process of identifying, assessing, and mitigating the control weakness. This aligns with best practices in internal control frameworks, such as COSO, which emphasize the importance of a control environment, risk assessment, control activities, information and communication, and monitoring. Specifically, it requires a systematic evaluation of the identified weaknesses' impact on Phat Group's objectives, followed by the design and implementation of appropriate remediation actions. This approach is ethically sound and professionally responsible, ensuring that potential risks are managed effectively and that the company's financial reporting and operational integrity are maintained, adhering to principles of good corporate governance and any applicable Vietnamese regulations concerning internal controls and financial transparency. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without a thorough risk assessment fails to address the underlying control deficiency. This could lead to the perpetuation of risks, potentially resulting in financial misstatements, operational inefficiencies, or non-compliance with regulations, which would be a significant ethical and professional failing. Another incorrect approach that involves bypassing established reporting lines for control issues undermines the integrity of the internal control system and the principle of accountability. This can create an environment where control weaknesses are hidden or not addressed systematically, posing a risk to the organization and its stakeholders. A third incorrect approach that relies on informal, undocumented solutions, while seemingly expedient, lacks the rigor and auditability required for effective control. This can lead to inconsistencies in control application and makes it difficult to monitor the effectiveness of remediation efforts, thereby failing to meet professional standards of diligence and transparency. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the company's objectives and the relevant regulatory landscape. This involves systematically identifying potential risks and control weaknesses, assessing their impact, and then designing and implementing controls that are both effective and efficient. Documentation and communication are paramount throughout this process, ensuring transparency and accountability. When faced with a control issue, the professional reasoning should prioritize adherence to established policies and procedures, seeking guidance from senior management or internal audit when necessary, and always aiming for a sustainable and compliant solution. Question 14. Analysis of a Phat Group financial analyst who, while reviewing internal documents, becomes aware of an impending, significant acquisition that Phat Group is planning to undertake. This information is not yet public and is considered highly material. The analyst has a personal investment portfolio and recognizes the potential for substantial personal profit if they were to purchase Phat Group shares before the acquisition announcement. What is the most appropriate and legally compliant course of action for this analyst? Option A. Wait for the acquisition to be publicly announced and then consider purchasing Phat Group shares. Option B. Refrain from trading on the information and report the possession of material non-public information through Phat Group's designated compliance channels. Option C. Discuss the potential acquisition with close friends and family, suggesting they consider investing in Phat Group. Option D. Immediately purchase Phat Group shares to capitalize on the anticipated price increase. The correct answer is D. Immediately purchase Phat Group shares to capitalize on the anticipated price increase. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Phat Group due to the inherent conflict between personal financial interests and the company's ethical obligations. The employee's knowledge of an upcoming, material, non-public acquisition creates a situation where acting on this information for personal gain would constitute insider trading, a serious violation of securities regulations and company policy. Careful judgment is required to navigate this conflict and uphold professional integrity. The correct approach involves refraining from trading on the material non-public information and instead reporting the information through appropriate internal channels, such as the compliance department or legal counsel, as per Phat Group's internal policies and relevant Vietnamese securities laws. This upholds the principle of fair markets and protects the company from regulatory scrutiny and reputational damage. Specifically, Vietnamese Decree No. 155/2020/NDCP on penalties for administrative violations in the securities and securities market, and the Law on Securities 2019 prohibit the use of inside information for trading. By reporting, the employee acts ethically and legally, fulfilling their duty of loyalty to Phat Group. An incorrect approach of trading on the information before it becomes public would be a direct violation of insider trading laws. This action exploits an unfair advantage, undermines market integrity, and exposes the employee to severe legal penalties, including fines and potential imprisonment, as well as disciplinary action from Phat Group, including termination. Another incorrect approach of discussing the information with friends or family, who might then trade on it, even if the employee themselves does not trade, is also a violation. This constitutes tipping, which is also prohibited under insider trading regulations. The employee would be facilitating illegal activity, leading to similar severe consequences. A third incorrect approach of waiting for the information to be publicly announced and then trading would be permissible, but it misses the opportunity to proactively address a potential compliance breach. While not illegal in itself, it fails to demonstrate the highest level of professional diligence and ethical responsibility in preventing potential misuse of sensitive information within the organization. The professional reasoning framework for such situations involves a clear understanding of company policies, relevant laws, and ethical principles. When faced with potential conflicts of interest or the possession of material non-public information, professionals should 1. Recognize the sensitivity and potential impact of the information. 2. Immediately cease any personal consideration of trading or sharing the information. 3. Consult internal compliance or legal departments to understand reporting obligations and appropriate actions. 4. Prioritize the company's ethical standards and legal compliance above personal gain. Question 15. The efficiency study reveals potential cost savings through streamlining production processes at Phat Group steel manufacturing facilities. However, preliminary findings suggest these changes might impact quality control procedures and potentially increase the risk of minor defects in certain product lines. Which approach best balances the pursuit of efficiency with regulatory compliance and ethical considerations for Phat Group? Option A. Implement the proposed efficiency measures immediately to realize cost savings, assuming minor defects are acceptable to customers and unlikely to cause significant issues. Option B. Prioritize the cost savings identified in the study, deferring any detailed quality control review until after the efficiency measures have been fully implemented. Option C. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to identify specific quality control vulnerabilities and potential impacts of the proposed changes, developing mitigation strategies before implementation. Option D. Rely on industry best practices from international competitors for quality control, assuming their standards are sufficient for Phat Group's operations. The correct answer is A. Implement the proposed efficiency measures immediately to realize cost savings, assuming minor defects are acceptable to customers and unlikely to cause significant issues. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the company's pursuit of operational efficiency with its ethical and regulatory obligations to stakeholders, particularly concerning the potential impact of cost-cutting measures on product quality and safety. Phat Group, as a publicly listed entity, is subject to stringent regulations and ethical standards that mandate transparency, due diligence, and responsible business practices. Careful judgment is required to ensure that efficiency gains do not compromise these fundamental principles. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that systematically identifies, analyzes, and evaluates potential risks associated with the proposed efficiency measures. This approach is professionally sound because it aligns with regulatory expectations for robust risk management frameworks, such as those outlined by Vietnamese corporate governance codes and relevant industry standards. By proactively identifying potential negative impacts on product quality, supply chain integrity, and customer satisfaction, Phat Group can develop appropriate mitigation strategies. This demonstrates a commitment to responsible corporate citizenship and adherence to legal and ethical duties, ensuring that the company operates sustainably and maintains stakeholder trust. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate cost reduction without adequate risk evaluation fails to meet regulatory standards. Such an approach could lead to the implementation of measures that inadvertently compromise product quality, potentially resulting in product recalls, reputational damage, and legal liabilities. This violates the duty of care owed to consumers and shareholders. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on external benchmarks without considering Phat Group's specific operational context and regulatory environment is also professionally deficient. While benchmarking can be useful, it must be adapted to the company's unique circumstances and legal obligations. Ignoring internal controls and specific Vietnamese regulations could lead to non-compliance and unintended negative consequences. A further incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a few key individuals without a structured risk assessment process is inadequate. Professional decision-making in risk management requires a systematic, evidence-based methodology. Relying on informal assessments can overlook critical risks and lead to poor strategic choices, potentially exposing Phat Group to significant financial and reputational harm. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with understanding the objectives of the efficiency study. This should be followed by a thorough risk identification process, considering all potential impacts across operations, product quality, supply chain, and stakeholder relations. Subsequently, risks should be analyzed and evaluated based on their likelihood and potential impact. Mitigation strategies should then be developed and implemented, with ongoing monitoring and review to ensure effectiveness. This systematic process ensures that efficiency initiatives are pursued responsibly and in compliance with all applicable regulations and ethical standards. Question 16. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a new industrial expansion project for Phat Group offers a compelling return on investment. However, the proposed site is adjacent to a sensitive ecological zone, and initial internal discussions have not thoroughly addressed potential environmental impacts or the specific regulatory approval processes required under Vietnamese law. What is the most prudent course of action for Phat Group's management? Option A. Halt the project indefinitely due to potential environmental concerns, even though the cost-benefit analysis is positive. Option B. Commission a comprehensive environmental impact assessment and initiate the process for obtaining all necessary regulatory permits and approvals before committing further resources to the project. Option C. Proceed with the project immediately to capitalize on the financial opportunity, deferring detailed environmental assessments and permit applications until after construction begins. Option D. Delegate the responsibility for environmental compliance to a newly formed, understaffed department, trusting them to manage the process efficiently without direct senior oversight. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the project immediately to capitalize on the financial opportunity, deferring detailed environmental assessments and permit applications until after construction begins. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in corporate finance and investment decision-making, where a proposed project for Phat Group appears financially attractive based on initial cost-benefit analysis. However, the challenge lies in ensuring that this financial attractiveness is not achieved at the expense of regulatory compliance and ethical conduct, particularly concerning environmental impact and stakeholder relations. The pressure to achieve financial targets can sometimes lead to overlooking or downplaying critical non-financial factors, making professional judgment and adherence to established guidelines paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves proceeding with the project only after a comprehensive environmental impact assessment and securing all necessary regulatory permits and approvals. This is justified by the Vietnamese legal framework governing environmental protection and investment projects. Specifically, laws such as the Law on Environmental Protection and relevant decrees mandate thorough environmental impact assessments for projects that may have significant environmental consequences. Furthermore, adherence to Phat Group's internal corporate social responsibility (CSR) policies and ethical guidelines is crucial. This approach ensures that the project aligns with legal obligations, minimizes potential environmental harm, and upholds the company's reputation and long-term sustainability, thereby safeguarding against future liabilities and stakeholder backlash. Incorrect approaches analysis. proceeding with the project solely based on the positive cost-benefit analysis, without conducting an environmental impact assessment or obtaining permits, represents a significant regulatory failure. This bypasses mandatory legal requirements and exposes Phat Group to substantial fines, project suspension, and reputational damage. It also demonstrates an ethical lapse by prioritizing short-term financial gains over environmental stewardship and legal compliance. Prioritizing the project's financial benefits and assuming that environmental concerns can be addressed later or as needed is another flawed approach. This demonstrates a lack of foresight and a disregard for the proactive nature of environmental regulations. Environmental issues often escalate and become more costly to rectify once they have occurred, and regulatory bodies typically require preemptive measures, not reactive ones. This approach also fails to meet ethical standards of responsible corporate citizenship, focusing exclusively on the cost-benefit analysis and delegating the environmental review to a junior team without adequate oversight or authority to halt the project if significant issues arise is also problematic. While delegation is a management tool, ultimate responsibility for compliance rests with senior leadership. This approach risks the junior team being pressured to overlook critical findings or lacking the experience to properly assess complex environmental risks, leading to potential non-compliance and ethical breaches. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Phat Group should adopt a decision-making framework that integrates financial analysis with robust risk management, regulatory compliance, and ethical considerations. This involves 1. Mandatory due diligence. Always conduct thorough due diligence, including environmental impact assessments and legal reviews before committing to significant projects. 2. Risk assessment and mitigation. Identify potential risks, environmental, legal, reputational, early, and develop mitigation strategies. 3. Stakeholder engagement. Consider the impact on all stakeholders, including the environment and local communities. 4. Adherence to policies and regulations. Strictly follow all applicable laws, regulations, and internal company policies. 5. Ethical prioritization. Ensure that financial objectives do not override ethical responsibilities and long-term sustainability. Question 17. Research into potential strategic advantages for Phat Group in the steel market has led to a situation where a contact within a competitor firm has offered to share details about their upcoming, unannounced product development pipeline. What is the most appropriate course of action for a Phat Group employee in this scenario? Option A. Immediately report the offer to the relevant regulatory authorities and Phat Group's compliance department, requesting guidance on how to proceed. Option B. Politely decline the offer, stating that Phat Group adheres strictly to ethical and regulatory guidelines regarding the use of non-public information, and suggest that any information shared should be through official, public channels. Option C. Inform the competitor contact that, while direct sharing is not possible, Phat Group would appreciate any publicly available information that can be gleaned from their general market presence and announcements. Option D. Accept the information, analyze it for potential competitive insights, and use it to inform Phat Group's product development strategy, ensuring that no direct trading activities are undertaken based on this information. The correct answer is B. Politely decline the offer, stating that Phat Group adheres strictly to ethical and regulatory guidelines regarding the use of non-public information, and suggest that any information shared should be through official, public channels. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Phat Group due to the inherent conflict between the desire to secure a competitive advantage and the strict adherence to regulatory frameworks governing insider information. The pressure to perform and achieve business objectives can sometimes lead individuals to consider shortcuts or information that may not be publicly available, creating a significant ethical and legal minefield. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate market research and the misuse of privileged information. The correct approach involves conducting thorough, publicly available market research and analysis. This means gathering information from sources such as official company reports, stock exchange filings, reputable financial news outlets, and industry publications. This method ensures that any strategic decisions made by Phat Group are based on a level playing field, respecting the principles of fair disclosure and market integrity. This aligns with the regulatory framework that prohibits the use of material non-public information for trading or strategic advantage, thereby preventing market manipulation and ensuring investor confidence. An incorrect approach would be to rely on informal discussions with a contact at a competitor to gain insights into their upcoming product launch. This is professionally unacceptable because it constitutes the acquisition and potential use of material non-public information. Such actions directly violate regulations designed to prevent insider trading and unfair market practices. The ethical failure lies in exploiting privileged information that is not accessible to the general investing public, thereby creating an unfair advantage for Phat Group and potentially harming the competitor and its stakeholders. Another incorrect approach would be to interpret a general market trend observed in publicly available data as specific, non-public information about a competitor's internal strategy. While market trends are public, misinterpreting them as direct insights into a competitor's confidential plans without concrete, verifiable evidence is speculative and can lead to flawed decision-making based on assumptions rather than facts. This approach risks making strategic decisions based on incomplete or misinterpreted information, which, while not directly insider trading, can still lead to poor business outcomes and reputational damage if based on unfounded assumptions about competitor actions. A professional reasoning framework for similar situations involves a multi-step process. First, always prioritize understanding and adhering to all relevant regulations and internal company policies regarding information handling and market conduct. Second, critically evaluate the source and nature of any information being considered. Is it publicly available and verifiable, or is it potentially material and non-public? Third, if there is any doubt about the legality or ethicality of using information, err on the side of caution and seek guidance from legal counsel or compliance departments. Finally, focus on building competitive strategies based on robust, transparent, and publicly accessible data, fostering a culture of integrity and fair play within Phat Group. Question 18. Market research demonstrates that understanding competitor pricing strategies is crucial for Phat Group's market positioning. An analyst is tasked with gathering this information. Which of the following approaches best aligns with ethical and regulatory expectations for competitive intelligence gathering? Option A. Focusing exclusively on Phat Group's own historical pricing data to infer competitor behavior. Option B. Purchasing a detailed competitor pricing analysis from an offshore data broker with an unverified track record. Option C. Analyzing publicly available pricing data, industry reports, and competitor product announcements. Option D. Directly contacting a sales representative of a competitor and inquiring about their internal pricing models and discount structures. The correct answer is C. Analyzing publicly available pricing data, industry reports, and competitor product announcements. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an analyst at Phat Group due to the need to balance competitive intelligence gathering with ethical and regulatory compliance. The core difficulty lies in obtaining information that is both useful for strategic decision-making and legally and ethically permissible. Misinterpreting or overstepping boundaries can lead to significant legal repercussions, reputational damage, and internal disciplinary action. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate market research and potentially illicit information acquisition. The correct approach involves utilizing publicly available information and engaging in standard, transparent market research practices. This aligns with general principles of fair competition and avoids any actions that could be construed as industrial espionage or insider trading. Specifically, it adheres to the spirit of regulations that promote transparency and prevent unfair advantages gained through illicit means. By focusing on published reports, industry analyses, and open-source intelligence, the analyst ensures that Phat Group's strategic decisions are informed by data obtained ethically and legally, thereby upholding the company's integrity and compliance. An incorrect approach that relies on attempting to solicit confidential information from a competitor's employee, even if framed as a casual conversation, is professionally unacceptable. This directly violates ethical codes of conduct and potentially breaches laws related to trade secrets and unfair competition. Such actions create a significant risk of legal penalties and severely damage Phat Group's reputation as a responsible corporate citizen. Another incorrect approach, which involves purchasing proprietary market research reports from unverified third-party sources without due diligence, carries substantial risks. While seemingly less direct, it can inadvertently lead to the acquisition of illegally obtained information, making Phat Group complicit in unethical practices. This bypasses the necessary checks and balances for ensuring data integrity and legality. A third incorrect approach, focusing solely on analyzing publicly available financial statements without considering broader market trends or competitor strategies, is insufficient. While legally sound, it represents a failure to conduct comprehensive market research, potentially leaving Phat Group at strategic disadvantage. This is not a regulatory or ethical failure in itself, but a failure in professional diligence and effectiveness. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the company's code of conduct, relevant industry regulations, and legal frameworks governing competitive intelligence. Analysts should prioritize methods that are transparent, ethical, and legally compliant. When in doubt about the permissibility of an information-gathering technique, seeking guidance from legal counsel or senior management is paramount. The decision-making framework should always prioritize integrity and long-term reputational health over short-term gains achieved through questionable means. Question 19. Comparative studies suggest that employees of publicly listed companies, such as Phat Group, often face ethical dilemmas when they possess information that could significantly impact the company's stock price. If an employee at Phat Group learns of a major, undisclosed strategic partnership that is expected to substantially increase the company's market value, and they are considering informing a close friend who is an investor, which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory requirements and ethical professional conduct? Option A. Inform the friend about the upcoming strategic partnership, emphasizing that it is confidential and should not be acted upon immediately. Option B. Refrain from disclosing any details of the strategic partnership to the friend, regardless of their relationship or the potential benefit to the friend. Option C. Share general positive sentiment about Phat Group's future prospects with the friend, without mentioning any specific undisclosed information. Option D. Disclose the information about the strategic partnership to the friend, advising them to wait a short period before making any investment decisions. The correct answer is B. Refrain from disclosing any details of the strategic partnership to the friend, regardless of their relationship or the potential benefit to the friend. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Phat Group regarding the disclosure of potentially material non-public information. The core difficulty lies in balancing the obligation to act in the company's best interest and uphold regulatory compliance, with the personal desire to inform a close acquaintance about a significant development. Strict adherence to Phat Group's internal policies and relevant Vietnamese securities regulations is paramount. The correct approach involves exercising extreme caution and refraining from disclosing any information that could be construed as material non-public information. This aligns with the principles of fair market conduct and prevents insider trading, which is strictly prohibited under Vietnamese law. Specifically, Article 12 of the Law on Securities, 2019, and related decrees prohibit the use of inside information to trade securities or disclose it to others for trading purposes. By choosing not to disclose, the employee upholds their fiduciary duty to Phat Group and avoids potential legal repercussions and reputational damage for both themselves and the company. An incorrect approach would be to disclose the information, even with the intention of helping a friend. This action directly violates the prohibition against insider trading and the misuse of material non-public information. Such a disclosure, regardless of intent, could lead to severe penalties for the employee, including fines and potential imprisonment, as well as significant sanctions against Phat Group. Another incorrect approach would be to disclose the information in a vague or indirect manner, believing this circumvents the rules. However, regulators often look beyond the literal wording to the intent and impact of the communication. If the information conveyed, even indirectly, allows the recipient to make a profitable trade based on non-public knowledge, it can still be considered a violation. The professional decision-making process in such situations requires a clear understanding of one's obligations as an employee of a publicly traded company. Professionals should always err on the side of caution when dealing with potentially sensitive information. A robust framework involves 1. Identifying the information. Is it material? Is it non-public? 2. Understanding the implications. What are the potential consequences of disclosure for the company and oneself? 3. Consulting internal policies and compliance officers. When in doubt, seek guidance from the company's compliance department or legal counsel. 4. Prioritizing ethical and regulatory obligations. Upholding the integrity of the market and the company's reputation should always take precedence over personal relationships or perceived benefits. Question 20. Operational review demonstrates that certain production reporting procedures at Phat Group are time-consuming and may not fully capture real-time output variations. Management is considering implementing a new automated system that aggregates production data. Which of the following approaches best balances efficiency gains with regulatory compliance and ethical reporting standards for Phat Group? Option A. Prioritize the speed of data aggregation by the new system, even if it means simplifying certain data points that were previously captured in manual reports to reduce reporting overhead. Option B. Conduct a thorough validation of the automated system's data output against existing manual records and internal control frameworks to ensure accuracy and compliance with Vietnamese accounting standards before full deployment. Option C. Implement the automated system immediately to streamline reporting, assuming that aggregated data will inherently reflect accurate production levels. Option D. Focus on reducing the number of reports generated by the new system to cut down on administrative costs, without a detailed review of how this impacts the granularity of financial information. The correct answer is C. Implement the automated system immediately to streamline reporting, assuming that aggregated data will inherently reflect accurate production levels. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Phat Group's management by requiring them to balance operational efficiency with adherence to regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. The core difficulty lies in identifying and implementing process improvements that not only enhance productivity, but also uphold the integrity of financial reporting and stakeholder trust, all within the specific legal and regulatory landscape governing Phat Group. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between genuine optimization and practices that could inadvertently lead to misrepresentation or noncompliance. The correct approach involves a systematic and transparent review of existing processes, focusing on identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies that do not compromise the accuracy or completeness of financial data. This approach prioritizes the implementation of improvements that are verifiable, auditable, and align with Phat Group's internal control frameworks and relevant Vietnamese accounting standards and corporate governance guidelines. Specifically, this means ensuring that any changes to accounting procedures or operational workflows are documented, justified by business needs, and do not obscure the true financial position or performance of the company. Regulatory compliance is paramount, and any process optimization must operate within the bounds of Vietnamese law, including tax regulations and securities disclosure requirements. Ethical considerations demand that improvements do not lead to unfair advantages, deception, or harm to any stakeholders. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction, without considering the impact on financial reporting accuracy, would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to the cutting of essential controls, the simplification of processes, to a point where financial data becomes unreliable or misleading, violating accounting principles and potentially securities laws. Another incorrect approach that involves the manipulation of operational data to present a more favorable financial picture, even if framed as an efficiency gain, is unethical and illegal. Such actions undermine the credibility of Phat Group's financial statements and could result in severe penalties, including fines and reputational damage. Furthermore, any approach that bypasses established internal approval processes or disregards the advice of compliance and legal departments risks creating significant regulatory exposure. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the regulatory environment applicable to Phat Group. This involves consulting relevant Vietnamese laws, decrees, circulars, and the company's own internal policies. The process should then involve cross-functional collaboration, including finance, operations, and legal/compliance teams, to assess the potential impacts of any proposed changes. A risk-based assessment should be conducted to identify potential compliance and ethical pitfalls. Finally, decisions should be documented with clear rationale and justification, ensuring that all improvements are sustainable, transparent, and contribute positively to both operational performance and corporate governance.